Welcome to the Dogish podcast, the only podcast dedicated to the dog parents and the topics, events, and personalities impacting their lives today. My name is Jasen Arias, founder of Forever USA. And as always, I have Miss Sylvia Wes with me, certified pet trainer, pet expert, and owner of Dog Up in This Bitch Dog Training. How are you today?
Well, actually, I'm good. I'm in a little different setting.
I see that.
If anyone hasn't noticed my missing dog wallpaper, and no, this isn't a green screen background. This I'm visiting my parents. It was my dad's 79th birthday on
Happy
Thursday.
Birthday.
So we are, yeah. I am.
Yeah, what'd you think about today's topic?
So we've had freaked out after our interview with Mary.
Yeah, we've had two in a row now that are kind of not like, I hate to call them Debbie Downer podcasts because I'm hoping that it energizes people to take action and do something.
Yeah, I feel like if anything, they're really informative, and I think that we're maybe shining a light in an area that probably is forgotten for most people. Yeah, I think let's just get into it. Today we have Mary Powell from the Red Cross. She's the executive director there in Nevada for the Red Cross. So let's get to chatting with her.
Let's do it. Okay, officially good morning to everybody.
Good morning.
A little monotone this morning.
Just a little bit.
Sylvia's isn't sitting with her doggy wallpaper in the background.
I know, but I do have this cat pillow. So
there
there's
it is,
that.
right? Yeah. But it's Saturday.
This one right there. If you're not watching this on video, you're missing excellent cat pillow footage.
Okay.
It's like I have a cat on my shoulder.
And I invited Mary to be on the show from the Red Cross. And Mary and I have known each other for a little while now. She actually used to work as part of the Forever USA team. And then how long ago did you start with the Red Cross, Mary?
Just over a year. This is my second disaster season to be amongst, and two unfortunately of the worst that we've had in our history. So
yeah,
lots of learning curve opportunities.
And we went to breakfast a few weeks ago, maybe a month and a half ago. And when we were talking, she had brought up that the Red Cross also obviously, and I mean, it seems obvious when you're talking through it, but I don't know that I necessarily thought about it when I think of the Red Cross, but because they're helping people who are displaced from bad things happening in the world, that includes animals as well. And so I thought it would be great just to kind of have you on and talk about that and kind of broaden people's spectrum on what the Red Cross does. And especially interested to hear what's going on here in the on the West Coast with all the fires that we're having right now and what you're seeing with the animals. So maybe let everybody know what it is that you do and what part of the world that you're in and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I'm an executive director with the American Red Cross. My territory is Northern Nevada. So we're active a lot with some of these fires that are here on the Sierra and kind of pushing people into Nevada as they're evacuating. But, Red Cross really works very, very collaboratively. So disasters across the country end up across my desk at one point or another. I'm actually slated to potentially deploy down to Louisiana with this hurricane. So
hurricane coming in.
Yeah. So again, really in tune with disasters across the country, but in our backyard right now, we do have wildfire activity. The number one thing that Red Cross responds to, though, is individual home fires. And we're doing that about every 2 days in Reno, Northern Nevada area. Some areas it's multiple times a day just with home fire activity. So
this isn't just like natural disaster stuff. This is minor.
No, yeah. A lot of people
disasters.
don't realize that we really are involved anytime that a disaster impacts a home like that, whether it's a fire, floods, not floods from your dishwasher, but a flood that, has come in because of excessive rain or something like that. If you're displaced and your home is deemed inhabitable, we're certainly going to want to be able to provide you that safety.
So, but does the Red Cross just naturally reach out to you, or is this something that you need to know about? let's say,
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
unfortunately, my house burns down. Are you guys just gonna show up like Men in Black and you're just there, or like we need
Sometimes
to
it
know?
works that way. Yeah, it works that way a lot of times, and it's not a trick. It's we have really good relationships with our fire departments, emergency managers. So oftentimes we are notified that a house has been impacted. If for some reason that communication does break down, anyone is always welcome to call 1-800 Red Cross and report a situation themselves, and we can reach out and see if we're available to assist, depending on the criteria of things. But yeah.
So what kind of things have you been seeing happening lately? Because I know like when we went and sat down last time, I think maybe we had to delay lunch, or there was something that was just affecting time wise, because it just seems like lately we've been dealing with one disaster after another disaster, and they just kind of compound. And so like what extremes are we dealing with right now?
Well, that's just the reality of the situation, right? We used to have what we called a disaster season, and we would see, maybe 5 somewhat large scale events happening within a year, and we would pop up a big operation, support it. Once it was kind of managed, we would scale back down. Red Cross is really pivoting to a much more chronic state of response because we have so many large scale disasters now happening around the year. Typically it's fall, right? Wildfires, summer, it's wildfires, fall, it's wildfires, hurricanes are usually fall timeframe, tornadoes, same thing. They go through a cycle. But then you see things like what happened in Texas last winter, like these extreme cold events. And we're just seeing more and more extreme events. They have longer durations. They're impacting more area for longer periods, just bigger groups. So disaster preparedness is just going to be a part of every person's life across the country. You probably have something within your area, regardless of where you are, that could impact you at any time.
What about cities?
Okay, we're gonna take a.
Oh, you gotta take a break. All right, take us
Jason,
to a break. Yeah,
we're
all right.
taking a quick break.
Very good. Okay, so like one of the
Jason,
things. Oh,
you
can
were
I talk
saying
now?
something about
Or do you want to talk?
cities.
Are you ready?
Mhm.
Like I can
This
talk.
is all about you.
Okay, let's go.
It's all you, Jason.
So like some of the things, so like with Texas in particular, that was in my mind, I mean, super fluke. And I know we're talking about disasters, so I mean they're not normal, but I mean you're not seeing those kind of temperatures in Texas very often. But with living in a city, let's talk about Los Angeles or San Diego or something like that. What kind of things would people expect there? Because like we're not talking about forest fires in the middle of San Diego. Really?
Well, I mean, we do have some
Well,
pretty large
yeah.
wildfire activity in some
Really?
of those Southern California. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And as the Santa Ana
Like
winds
as
are coming in.
as a Los Angeles
Yeah.
resident, like we get a lot of wildfires.
What about like civil unrest
Yeah, I
stuff?
think
Do you guys
last
get
year we
involved with
lost
that?
like 200 acres.
Um,
What were you saying,
yes,
Jason?
to answer your
Civil
question,
unrest.
Jason, we do monitor civil unrest. So we wouldn't help like in not urban, but like in commercial areas. So if it's a business that's impacted, Red Cross is not going to support. But if a home is impacted through civil unrest, we would stand up and provide support. In rare cases, we get involved in what we call mass casualty events, and those are really unfortunate. We don't like to talk about them, but the shootings in Las Vegas that happened, we were very much present in providing a lot of mental health support and helping to get that community back on its feet. So we monitor a lot of different activities that are happening. We were down at the building collapse in Florida and supporting the search and recovery effort. We're actually managing the reunification center and helping families to get reunified and then transferred into some long-term mental health support and spiritual care support through that situation. And then of course the housing, because the people that did evacuate that building still had to go somewhere because they couldn't go back. So we get involved in a lot of different situations, and when we're called, if there's human suffering in the face of emergencies, that's what we're called into typically. That's our mission statement, is to alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies.
Gotcha. So you guys are kind of like the Coast Guard almost.
We're a pretty big agency. I mean, we're nonprofit, 100%. We're
Sure.
completely dependent on donations. Some people actually think we are a government agency, and we're not. But we've been around for
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
140 years that Red Cross has been active and engaged in our country. And so,
Whoa.
yeah, we have some very long standing ties with our response efforts and the role that we fill in our nation.
Okay.
Okay, wait. So I have a question.
Oh, you ready?
No,
now?
I have a question, Jason. So what do you know what the first 140 years ago, is that like documented what the first I need to know what it was 140 years ago. What did you guys do?
So 140 years ago, our founder was Clara Barton, and she's a nurse. And it really came back to supporting troops in wartime. A lot of people don't realize that the International Federation of Red Cross, which is our international entity that all these different, country chapters, kind of country entities fall under, the International Federation of the Red Cross is actually the custodians of the Geneva Convention. So we're there to put kind of some of those wartime rules in place that help to mitigate human suffering even through wartime. And so Clara Barton was there helping troops on both sides of war in 140 years ago. And a lot of it goes back to nursing. Our first Nevada activity was nursing. We were training nursing through the Comstock during smallpox outbreaks, like in the late 1800s. So even in Nevada, we go back as early as 1989 or 1898, I think is the number. So long history within Red Cross. We've evolved and adapted over time, but a lot of our core mission programs remain intact.
Interesting.
Yeah, when you said we go back as far as 1989, I was like, oh, your girl's feeling old.
No.
So I'm glad you changed it.
18. Yeah.
Okay, so like we kind
Awesome.
of like dived into that and all the stuff, but on this show, one of the things we talk about is the growth that we've seen of animals becoming part, not just like a like holding a place in our life, but truly like family members to us. And so I would imagine that you guys are seeing just over the last decade to 20 years, the shift of having to help animals at the same exact time, or like how do you guys get involved at that level?
So we definitely have some great resources for people, and we want people to think about their pet safety as much as they would think about their own personal safety when it comes to being in a disaster. So much of disaster response is improved when people are prepared. A lot of times what we're dealing with as Red Cross is after the fact, people have evacuated their homes and they've forgotten to grab their pet's food, or they've forgotten to grab their personal medication or their pet's medication. And then we're triaging at that point and trying to fill needs that takes up a lot of time and energy. When if you're prepared, you're going to have a seamless transition in those emergencies and hopefully safeguard your personal preparedness is going to be your best bet. When large scale disasters are happening, our attention is pulled in so many directions. And for emergency responders, for even the Red Cross, our number one priority is going to be human assets. We are going to prioritize human safety. It's just the facts when these large scale disasters happen. So you being prepared for your pet and for yourself is going to make sure that those things happen better than any agency can take care of you. Of course, we're going to try our hardest. We care about animals, and we know that the role that pets play in people's lives and how important they are. So we always try to address those things. But you look at a Category 4 hurricane coming into Louisiana right now. We're talking tens of thousands of people that are in harm's way, and we can only do so much in those critical moments.
I think we talked about that a little bit too, Sylvia, if you recall, with we had a company called Pet Evac Pack on the show. What was that, 4 or 5 weeks ago? They're actually based here in Reno as well. Mary, I don't know if you've met them or talked to them.
No, but I need to.
We'll connect you. And they put together these evacuation packs specifically for excuse me, you can customize it to your animal. But I mean, they have some kind of more generic ones where it's like small dog, medium dog, large dog, custom double pack, like all these different things. And they really break down like all the different stuff that's going to be unique for an animal as opposed to yours. And that's why when we had a chance to bring you on, like I can hear some of our listeners kind of cringing a little bit, hearing like, oh no, that the humans are going to be the ones taken care of first. But the part that's important to me is that this is part of the preparedness of something that's going in. Like you have to have proper expectations so that you know what you need to take care of on your own. And I guess that would be one of my next questions. What is the experience for somebody that is completely unprepared? Like I haven't done anything. I left the house and I'm holding on to my dog and my kid and my wife, and all we have is like some burnt t-shirts and shorts on, and that's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to depend again on the individual disaster. If it's an individual home fire, typically what Red Cross will do is come in and provide financial assistance. So you can go get a hotel room and you can look for what's best for you in that scenario. If you have a pet, you can go find a pet friendly hotel room, hopefully that will take you in. And we'll give you some, hopefully financial assistance too, to cover those essentials, the food and some extra clothing and dog food and things like that. So you'll be given a small financial assistance stipend as fast as we can possibly get it to you to cover those first couple of days, right? And then work in recovery work with connecting you to individual resources that might be relevant to your situation and help you get back on your feet. And our caseworkers are amazing about walking people through that process. I have to give a pitch. If you are a renter, get renter's insurance. It's the biggest thing we see, that individuals that rent, their home burns down, they've lost everything, and they're very limited on what they can get back because they didn't have renter's insurance. It costs $7 to $10 typically a month. It is nothing. So we see very, very few renters with it, and it is a huge barrier to getting back on your feet without it. So that's my pitch there. For a large scale disaster, if you've left, first of all, take your pet with you. I hate to say it, but sometimes people downplay how severe these events are. And maybe you think, that fire is 6 miles from here. There's no way it's going to come. I'm just going to leave my dog behind where he's comfortable, and we're going to go because I know we'll be back. You may not be back, and these fires can move very, very fast with wind, and situations can change. The best forecasts and estimates on these disasters are never perfectly accurate. Take your pet with you. You can't get back. They won't let you to go back. So I'm amazed at how many people actually leave their pets behind, and thinking it's what's best for the pet, right? They don't want to put it in a shelter. They don't want to displace their pet, but
sure, the stress.
yeah,
right.
yeah. I mean, I get as a pet owner, like I have dogs and they're my life. So I get, like, sometimes you'd think, oh, my dog's elderly and it's hard for him to travel. Take them with you. So that's my first tip. Second, have a way to confine them yourselves. Bring a kennel with you. If you don't have a kennel in your house, make sure you have a really sturdy harness and leash. A lot of times when you're coming home from these events, maybe your fence has been taken down. Maybe you've had damage around your property. It's going to disorient your pet if their normal scent areas have been washed away or have been burned away, and their entire environment has changed. So we see a lot of pets escape in these situations because they're traumatized as well. And so making sure you have really good ways to secure your pet, microchip them. We want to reunify when we can. So it's always good to have them microchipped. Put a collar on them.
Do you guys have the ability to scan pets?
We always work with local animal agencies when these situations happen. So Red Cross doesn't, but we always bring in those animal agencies to support just this. Not every shelter, most shelters won't take your pet. So that is another thing to consider, is where will you go? If you want to stay with your pet, where will you go that you can have them with you? We will provide opportunities to shelter pets, but they won't necessarily be with you. So just, again, setting the right expectation ahead of time of what usually the government agencies, emergency management, Red Cross, we support their efforts. Understand those limitations and have alternatives. If you really have to be with your pet, know where you're going to go.
Okay, let's take a quick break and we'll get right back to this. Okay, so we're back. I have questions.
Yeah.
So you mentioned something, and like, this is just from my experience, because like in California, obviously we experience large scale wildfire events where we lose, like, I think last year we lost 200 acres in Los Angeles, lots of
Probably more than
homes.
200.
It was really
I'm
bad.
sure.
200,000.
I think it was more. Yeah, it was like, it was a lot. It was a huge amount of loss. And so I've done drives and like donation drives, like getting supplies to families who've lost their homes. Like I will never forget putting together, I think they call them like recovery kits, which is basically like we have to get the families like buckets, shovels, and like nets so
Yep.
that they can go back and sift through their home ashes to like recover anything that they might need. Like I remember putting those kits together with like my local hardware store, a couple different hardware stores. And something that I think that people don't realize, which you mentioned, is that you cannot shelter with your pets in a lot of these places. Like you just can't. And that's not because I think that people are like out to get you and your dog, but the reality of like there will be other people in the shelter who might be allergic to dogs. There are children there who might be allergic to dogs or have special needs where like they are afraid of your dog, even if your dog is like wonderful and great. Like it's just not possible.
And not
So
just to
if
mention
you're listening to
dealing with
this,
with dog aggressions as they're going through this
yes.
stress as well.
Yes. Some dogs are not dog friendly. And so like I think that like if you're listening to this and you're like, "Oh gosh, like I'm totally afraid that my dog won't have anywhere to go." Like, or if you're like, "Oh wow, that's terrible. How can I help?" Like you can sign up. There are lists where you can sign up to be like a temporary shelter placement for a dog, a temporary foster home for a dog who is displaced from an emergency. Like these lists do exist. You can become a part of them. And you can search them for people just to know like what's available in your area, or like have a family member that maybe can take your dog in the event of an emergency like this, because yeah, they won't be able to stay with you there.
Yeah, it's just pre-planning. Pre-planning is always everything, right? So have those plans in place. Do you and your pet have some place you can go, whether it's a friend or a
Mhm.
family member's house, that you can ride out an event? We will provide opportunities, but again, I get that the opportunities that are provided through the shelters are not ideal. It's like we're going to shelter your animal at a second location in a kennel, typically, which I don't want my dog there either, but it is an emergency, right? Like in an emergencies, we have to just do what we have to do to keep everybody safe. And so it's not ideal. And I would recommend you have a plan in place so you can have a better situation for yourself if that event happens.
Do you have resources for helping people know what they could do to be prepared?
100%. I'm so glad you asked that question.
Let me toss
So
that softball for you there.
people can go to redcross.org/pets with an S, pets. And there's a bunch of resources on there of things to think through ahead of time, things to pack,
Mm,
links to, getting a microchip, all those things that you can do ahead of time. If your pet is on medications, you need to have their medications with you, or at least a list of their medications, just as much as you need that for yourself. So thinking through all of those things in advance, I
mhm.
pack a duffel. I have a duffel bag for my whole family, right? It has all those things in it. And sometimes it's taking your personal documents, medication list, take a picture of it and throw it on a thumb drive and throw it in that bag, just so you have a way to access it. And again, make sure you take it with you when you leave, if at all possible. And pre-plan as well. If you aren't home and your pet is, do you have a neighbor or friend that could go and get them? Because sometimes you're at work and you're not going to be allowed to get back into an evacuation zone. We try to accommodate that, but I've seen it happen where a fire is raging really heavily in an area and it's not safe to let people return to their homes. But if you had a friend or a neighbor that was in the area that could swing by and pick up your pet, like have that plan in place as well.
What about the thought, like, um, so I was just kind of going through this, like if we couldn't get back into our neighborhood, I have neighbors that I could absolutely call, but my dogs may or may not want to go with them. Like it might be dangerous for my neighbors to come over and try and grab my dogs and put them in. Is it better just to let the dogs out as opposed to keeping them locked into a yard? Like are animals smart enough to move away from the danger or no?
I would say I don't know what the Red Cross stance on that. It would probably be no, but at the same time, every emergency is different
Right.
and your level of emergency is going to be different. And depending on the circumstances, you've got to make the best decision that you can make in that moment. And your pet, yeah, it's probably going to be better off loose than stuck in a house or stuck in a yard. That makes common
Wow,
sense
where
to
they can't
me.
get out.
Where they
Mm.
can't get out and they're stuck. We've certainly seen it with livestock. A lot of times the
Right. And
livestock
that's kind of I was
will
thinking
get
like
left.
horses and stuff like that. Because I
They
mean,
have an instinct.
I would imagine that like you're going to have certain size limitations. Somebody's not going to be able to show up with 30 horses and say, where are we
Well,
putting these guys?
we try to have a contingency for livestock and pets. So there usually when you look at these evacuation orders, it'll say, here's your evacuation shelter, here's the, evacuation for plan for pets and livestock, and we'll have places to go. And I know it'll be no shock to either of you, but the animal community rallies pretty heavily
Yep.
around these
Mhm.
events. And we do see people that will come in with trailers and try to get the animals out. Again, no one wants to see any loss of life,
Sure.
four-legged or two-legged. So we're always going to be working to try and prevent as much as possible.
Or tripods. I know
Or
we'll get messy.
tripods. I mean, you don't want to miss those. They're my favorite.
So what does that part of the experience look like when you show up? So like something's happened and I would imagine that you guys either have buses that are going to take you down to the shelter or if you got your car out, you're able to drive somewhere. Like what are those first initial steps look like? Because like for me, again, and I have a question about your duffel bag too, but so don't let me forget that. But for me, just having some sense of anticipation. I know every emergency is going to be different and working in different locations is going to be like all of these different things. But if I was to show up and have some kind of idea, like, okay, I know that the Red Cross is probably going to be giving me a piece of paper and then they're going to put us into a particular area and then they're going to provide us likely with these kind of supplies. And then we're on our own from there versus that. I mean, we experience that little bit of fear just walking into a new room for a cocktail party where you're like, I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. I'm just going to hide here in the corner, let alone the chaos of an emergency.
Yeah.
So like, what does that look like?
Well, we always ask that you check in with a volunteer first. So our Red Cross team at a Red Cross managed shelter, and they're not always Red Cross managed, but from our experience, we have an open shelter in Nevada right now. We have a beautiful team of volunteers that are just standing by waiting for people to arrive. And they're going to check you in. Right now, we're going to screen you for COVID and make sure that we have the right health protocols in place as well. We have currently at the shelter that's open right now, a giant trailer sitting right in the very front with a ton of kennels sitting right there. So as soon as you arrive, we're going to have some supplies for you to get your pet secured. We will talk to you about the best option for you if you want to stay on site. Usually a congregate shelter, that's what we call most of our mass care shelters. Congregate shelters are cots in an area that we have spaced out
Like a
equally.
gymnasium.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we got for an emergency. So we put people on cots. Right now we have distancing requirements because of COVID, so they're more spread out than a typical shelter time, but we'll make sure that you're safe. If you have a pet, it might have to go to that animal shelter that's nearby, depending on the shelter and what they allow. So it really depends on the facility. So always ask them those questions. What's the plan? Sometimes people come down to the shelter and they'll have their trailer with them, or they'll even tent camp around the shelter. And that's an option. And that's one way that some people stay with their animals, is that they stay near the shelter on property and they bring a tent or they bring their trailer down. They still have access to the shelter, so they're getting regular information through our communications channels. And we have support services such as, feeding and emotional health support and health services, all available. So they'll stay near us. So they have access to some of those things, but they can be with their pets. So that's an option as well. So it's really I agree. It's unfortunately case by case, emergency by emergency. If you don't have transportation out of the evacuation center, we will likely have a sheriff's department, police department. Sometimes we have shuttles. Again, depends on the emergency. They'll get you out. those sheriff's officers and police officers are going to go door by door and knock and make sure people are out
Wow.
of those areas. So we've seen that happen.
Which also like is like an endangerment to their life. So like if you're in an evacuation zone, like just evacuate.
Just get out.
Don't
Yeah,
wait.
if at
Just
all
go.
possible, get out. If you don't have transportation, call and tell somebody I'm here at this house and I don't have transportation. I mean, the compassion of people is when you work for the Red Cross, you see the best of people, and the compassion and humanitarian spirit around these events is incredible. And there will be people that will help you if at all possible.
Wow.
Hmm.
Okay. We're gonna take one last break. I know. And we'll be right back.
Perfect. All right, so here's one of my last big questions that that I've been dying to ask. And you had a military background already before starting with the Red Cross, but since starting with the Red Cross, you mentioned that duffel bag that you have. What have you changed or modified or like added to that just as a level of preparedness? And you have
Ooh.
you've got your husband, your daughter, and the two doggos.
Yep.
So that's a fairly average family size. So do you have individual
That's
duffel
a
bags?
hefty duffel bag.
Do you have one? Like, talk to me about this duffel bag.
So I have multiple duffel bags. One, because again, like running the scenarios through my head, I have a duffel bag in my trunk and it's a smaller one and it has some basics. It's a dual purpose duffel bag for my personal evacuation, as well as like if I were to reunify with family somewhere or have family with me. So I have a smaller number in there. It's also my Red Cross go bag. So there's some different items in that when I'm called out to a disaster with no notice. So I carry that in my trunk. Our home preparedness is a little bit more robust. We do have the duffel bags, change of clothes, the documentations on a thumb drive, medication lists, anything like that.
How much of this stuff did you have before working at the Red Cross?
Well, I lived in Alaska before I moved here, and I'm prior military. So I've always been a pretty prepared person.
Hmm.
The thumb drive tip is a Red Cross tip that I did not have before. And I've always thought, like, I'm not going to carry my passport in a duffel bag in my closet, right? Like, realistically, that just never really made sense to have like my birth certificate and stuff in a go bag. But I can take pictures of it and put it on a thumb drive. Like that was such a smart idea. I was like, I don't know why I've never thought of that before. So that was the big tip that I love. Same thing with your valuable photographs. Like you think about evacuation, people ripping the photos off the wall, right? Like we live in a digital age. Take pictures of that stuff. Get your stuff digitized so you can transport and you won't be at risk of losing them. Especially that older stuff that, maybe mom or dad passed down to your grandma and grandpa. So that's probably the biggest takeaway. I keep food and water for at least 72 hours. That's the recommendation for all of us.
So what does that look like? Like, what does 72 hours of food and water look like? Because I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions that we have, like how much we actually consume within 72 hours.
Well, and food is not the priority. I hate to say that. Like food, yes, but really water, because you use water a lot more than just to drink, and people don't realize that. And if your water is contaminated, just even hygiene and things like that, you're going to want to have some water supply. So I always have a gallon per person per day. So 72 hours, depending on the size of your family, plan for. With Red Cross,
If you go back, like that is an important number that I don't think people really wrap their, like they hear it and a gallon per person per day as like a minimum. And obviously maybe your dogs are going to be a little bit less than that. But when you start, like, just go do this exercise. Go put 3 days of water for every single person in your family in the back of your car and look how much space that takes up.
Yeah.
It's not.
Well, and how to store your water. I mean, make sure you have the right storage receptacles for these things as well, especially if you're going to fill them and have them sitting. You don't want to rotate your water every day, obviously. So there are some some vessels that are created to hold water more long term. So look at that, and if, again, each disaster is different, and you need to look at where you are and what the threats are to your community. A hurricane, you can see that coming, right? So you have time to refill your water containers. You have time to maybe fill up a bathtub and have that available in case the water supply is messed up or whatever. In an earthquake in California, you're going to get zero notice. So no notice events are totally
normal
different.
one day.
Yep. Yeah, it's very, very different. So you have to think about
scary.
those things. And if you're in California, you better have like a large water receptacle that you're keeping fresh every, so many months, depending on what you have it in. So thinking through these things, it's no fun. Like, nobody wants to think about this stuff, but it's really, really important to your personal safety, because when large scale events happen, again, everyone is stretched thin. Red Cross is local. We're usually in all communities in some level. But when a big community event happens, we have to bring in resources. And that's where that 72 hours comes in, is it takes a few days to get things mobilized and into those communities to help them. We can't be there that first second, especially with no notice events like an earthquake.
Well, and I think the other thing, and I've talked to Christy about this before, in any event, it doesn't matter whether it's a hurricane or a forest fire or flooded, like, sometimes it's not about avoiding the disaster, it's about avoiding everything that's going on because of the disaster. So if I have water and food in my house, and we have a bag of dog food as just like emergency dog food, like a really big bag that we don't use, and we'll end up probably just throwing it away and putting something else back there and rotating through it. But the whole purpose is because I don't want to go to the grocery stores.
No, right.
Like if everybody just needs to go back and think about, people were fighting over toilet paper for no freaking reason in a not real disaster. I'm not trying to make plight of anything, but this was not a hurricane or an earthquake suddenly hits and everybody is rushing for these supplies. It's like, I want nothing to do with grocery stores or the streets or anything like that. I want to be able to stay in my home as well.
Mm-hmm.
So having that stuff there to avoid ending up in a disaster is part of the solution as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. Again, I have a pantry. I purposely keep canned and like pouch. I mean, we're in such a great age now, I feel like, too. I think about my grandma's preparedness, and she had to like jar stuff, right? Like, we have so many great meal options. Yeah, we have great meal options that have long shelf life. My personal favorite, there's like these like lentil packs, you can get them at Costco, right? They're really tasty and they have a long shelf life. I throw a few of those in my bag because I know I could eat it cold even if I had to, right? And it would be super yummy. It's got protein, it's got everything that I'd need to give me energy to keep me going. So there's a lot. I would avoid sugary granola bars. Like, think through what your true nutritional needs are going to be in these scenarios. But pre-planning is everything. And nobody thinks it's ever going to happen to them. That we see that over and over and over again. People coming to shelters and just saying, I didn't think it would hit us. I didn't think it would be us. Even with home fire response, people standing barefoot on the street corner when we show up, and it's like their home is burning in front of them. And they're like, we just never thought this would happen.
And again, to give hold up, quick shout out back to Pet Evac Pack again, because like some of this is complicated.
Correct.
To go through and like, hey, we need this, and how do I know what we need? And you'd mentioned like, we're growing up in this age that has all this great stuff now. There's literally this company that we're mentioning on here that you can just kind of get it and forget it type deal and know that probably 90% of your needs are going to be covered for your pet. And if you want to open it up and duplicate it for yourself as well, because it's going to just double it in size.
Well, and again, Red Cross has a ton of information as well. redcross.org/pets for your pets, but you can go on there. We even have pet CPR classes, right? Like, we can get you ready for your pets, so go get educated and take action to be prepared.
Awesome. Yep. Well, we have come to the end of the show. That's it. We did it.
I have one
But
lined up.
before we let you go, Mary, before we let you go,
Funny
Jasen
story.
has something very
Funny-
special to share with
funny-
you.
no,
Oh goodness.
Funny story. Mary was actually part of the original inspiration behind the dog dad jokes.
Wow. Well, Mary, your brainchild at work.
I don't know that this is the legacy I want.
Yeah, it is. It's the best one. So actually, I'm gonna ask you a question. You had a joke in particular that you absolutely loved.
Oh no.
Do you remember what your
no.
favorite dog dad joke was? Like you wanted to put this on a t-shirt, so that was going to go on our next shirt.
Oh no, what was it? There were so many good ones. Did I have a favorite? I probably did.
You wrote it down on the door, and it was
Wait,
how-
is this the joke?
yeah, I'm trying to find a way to
No, just say it. I'm not gonna remember it. My brain, I see the
He's
door
busy.
though.
yeah.
She's in
What do
like
you-
hurricane mode.
What do you call a dog that does magic?
Say it.
Labracadabrador.
I mean, that's funny.
It's good. I think there's a chance that we use that one on the early podcasts. Do you remember, Sylvia?
I've never heard this.
You've never heard that one?
No,
Okay, yeah,
this is news to me.
Labracadabrador.
This joke is
Labracadabrador.
news to me.
But I couldn't pass on it.
There
Like
you
I
go,
was
Mary.
sitting here looking.
He's
I
been
almost had another one.
saving this for you.
Well, no, I had a different one about how a dog avoided getting kicked out of their apartment. He renegotiated his leash.
Oh man.
That's the
I'm
one I
sorry,
was.
You got
Sylvia.
two jokes, Mary. This is so, but what I'm understanding is like I have you to blame for this. Okay. All right.
Maybe
Well,
a
next
little
time a
bit.
guest feels tortured, I'll be like, Mary Powell, everyone.
Whatever. I'm in talks
No, we
with
thank you for
Netflix to do my own comedy special. It's coming.
Good luck with that.
Oh my gosh. Well, Mary, thank you so much for coming on with us today and just talking like preparedness, especially in such unprecedented times. We are coming into that fall season. So if you or your family are at risk of experiencing an emergency, please check out the Red Cross. Please check out Pet Evac. Be prepared, feel prepared. I can tell you after these last two interviews, I'm feeling extremely underprepared. So it's definitely changing my mind about how I need to be ready because, like you said, no one thinks it's going to happen to them, but it's going to happen to someone.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
it could be you.
All right. Very good.
Thanks so much, Mary.
Thank you for having me.
Just want to take a quick moment to thank everyone for listening today and our guest, Mary Powell, again. As always, anything that we discussed, websites, and we talked about the Pet Evac pack again. It's all going to be listed in the show notes. Please make sure to check us out on social media, which is at Dogish Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. If you're not already, please hit that subscribe button so that you know when new episodes are happening. I'm doing airline traffic directing.
I know
if you're
your
not
hands are
watching me on
moving a
YouTube
million
right now.
miles an hour, and your video's
You
not
need
quite
to-
keeping up with it. It's
You
fascinating.
need to now I'm voguing. It's happening. Anyways, follow, subscribe, review, rate, and if there is a topic, personality, or anything else pet related that you're like, hey, you guys need to talk about it, let us know so that we do. We'll
Please
see you
do.
next time.
Awesome. Bye.